The weight of a promise. When Jonah Mercer was a boy, his father used to wake him before sunrise and drive them out to the edge of town, where the highway light bled into prairie and the horizon looked like a promise. "You remember this?" his father would say, tapping the dashboard with a thumb so worn the leather gave. "A promise is a quiet thing until you keep it. It gets heavy, but that's how you know it matters." Jonah carried that line like a talisman for years. His father, Thomas, was the kind of man who showed love in small actions. A repaired bicycle with a new chain, a casserole on a sick day, a coin folded into an envelope tucked under a pillow when rent went late. Thomas rarely spoke about himself. He'd come home from the mill smelling like coal and coffee, and Jonah learned early that many of the important things in life arrive without fanfare. When the factory closed and the town began to hollow out, Thomas did what he always did. He found ways to shoulder other people's burdens. He paid heating bills for old Mrs. Daly 2 winters running. He fixed the brakes on Mr. Cortez's pickup and refused to take a payment. He left sealed envelopes on porches. The recipients never asked how the money had arrived, and he never told. Folks called him a saint behind his back and a fool to his face. Jonah watched, careful as a librarian watching a rare book, because he loved the man and wanted to keep him intact for as long as he could. One summer evening, when Jonah was 24, Thomas did not come home. A highway rig jackknifed it on the interstate. An 18-wheeler, rain-slick lanes, a stack of lives that collapsed in one noisy second. Thomas was driving another man's truck that night, delivering a mattress to a family who just moved back into town. They found him in the cab, hands still gripping the steering wheel, eyes open at the sky. The funeral was the kind that settles over a town and refuses to leave. People came with casseroles and stories, and Jonah gave the eulogy with a voice he barely recognized. Afterwards, the house felt different. The cane that used to lean in the corner like a promise now rested against the wall untouched. Jonah found in a shoebox a list of names his father had kept: neighbors, phone numbers, small notes, fix heater, paid December 14th. Mrs. D. groceries, NOV, keep quiet. At the bottom of the list, a single line: promise, keep them warm. Grief mutates. For Jonah, it wove itself into a stubborn resolve. He would carry the weight his father left behind, because somewhere between doing nothing and doing something, Thomas had decided to keep other people's promises for them. Jonah took the list, his father's ledger, and a small, dented box of quarters and started where his father had started, quietly. He paid utilities anonymously, left groceries at doorsteps, fixed the same brakes. He learned the art of being invisible. Years passed. Jonah's quiet acts became a rhythm. The town, call it Hollowell, saw fewer faces. Its main street shrank like fabric in a hot wash. Yet in the oldest neighborhoods, lights stayed on. Kids got their shoes. People made it through winter. Rumors grew into a legend. Someone was looking out for the forgotten. They called the stranger the Winter Man, the angel with a truck. Jonah kept his head down and his ledger close. He learned how to move donations like a shadow and how to refuse recognition with the kind of easy humility his father had modeled. Then came the reporter. Maya Ortiz arrived in Hollowell on a rainy Tuesday with a notebook the size of a brick and a hunger that read as daylight in her eyes. She was 30, quick-tongued, and had the kind of earnest curiosity that turned into persistence. She had grown up not far from here and remembered a childhood scraped thin by bills and empty promises, which is why the rumor of a secret benefactor hit her like a pulse. The city paper had a weekly feature on small miracles. Someone had filed a tip. Maya called it a story about civic decency surviving economic hard times. Jonah called it a complication. She canvassed neighborhood after neighborhood, arms full of questions, and found people who could not stop smiling when they spoke about envelopes on porches or a repaired heat pump. "It helped me keep my job," Mrs. Daly told Maya, tears soft as tea steam. "I never told anyone, but there it was." The trail was mostly kindness and mystery. Maya followed it like a hound follows a scent, until it led back to the highway. At the diner where Jonah sometimes fixed an evening cup for free in the off hours, Maya ordered coffee and asked the old man at the counter if he'd seen anyone suspicious delivering mattresses, paying under the table. The old man looked at Jonah and winked. "You asked the wrong question," he told her. "You should be asking why someone would do this without calling attention." When Maya asked to speak to the unknown benefactor, the town shrugged. They wanted the story told, but they wanted the person protected. There's a peculiar tenderness in small towns. People value discretion. Maya sensed as much, and it made the hunt sweeter, because it was not about catching a thief but revealing a kindness. Months into her reporting, she found an old photo in the library archives. A grainy black and white of a man at a community bake sale from decades ago. He'd been 25 in that shot, cheeks full, carrying a pie. The caption: "Volunteer Thomas Mercer, Hollowell, 1989. Maya's fingers hovered on the paper. She brought the photo to Jonah as a courtesy. He looked at it, and for the first time since his father died, his face altered in front of her, not hiding sorrow but something like relief. "You knew him?" she asked gently. Jonah nodded. "My father." There were words that didn't need to be said. Maya's jaw pressed forward. She asked questions. Jonah answered with caution. Still, she kept returning. Because where there's a mystery that comforts strangers, there's always a deeper truth waiting to be gentle. One chill afternoon, Maya found a lead. An envelope, not mailed. Left in a mailbox with a return address washed away by rain. Inside was a receipt from a hospice that listed a balance paid in full and a note. "Make sure she stays warm. TM." It was a signature like a fingerprint. It pulled open a seam in Jonah's reserve. He had been repairing others' lives, but his father had been doing this long before him. A question settled into town like mist. Did Jonah know? Did he approve? People had been living off two men's quiet generosity for years, and some thought it miraculous. Others smelled scandal. Maya pushed harder. Her editor wanted a hero piece, but she had noticed something else. Scattered over the years were decisions Thomas had made that were not only acts of charity but small acts of defiance. Oil payments to families refusing to leave an old neighborhood, cash advances to teachers who wouldn't accept a loan, bills that had been claimed as debts the benefactor could not repay. Those choices risked more than kindness. They risked his reputation, his money, his life. There was a pattern that suggested an origin beyond simple goodwill, and Maya wanted to know why. Jonah finally let her into the core of it on a gray morning when the town smelled of rain and burned leaves. He sat her at his kitchen table and slid his father's ledger across the surface. Page after page of names, small tallies, and the occasional line like "promise, keep them warm." Maya read until the ink blurred. "He kept promises for people who couldn't keep their own," Jonah said. "He paid for things so folks wouldn't have to choose between food and heat. He did it because it's how he loved us." Maya's fingers paused. Why would he do this for people he barely knew? Jonah's laugh was small and tired. He knew what it was to be fragile. He made a promise once, to a woman on the night his child was born. He'd said he'd carry the world if it meant she'd have a chance. He carried that world until he couldn't anymore. Maya kept writing. Somewhere between the lines she began to see not only the act but the weight of the promise. How one man's vow could alter 1,000 lives without asking permission. She wrote the piece differently than her editor expected. It wasn't about exposing an anonymous donor. It was about understanding the economy of generosity, the currency of human care. When the story ran, readers flooded the town with messages. Some wanted to reveal the winter man. Some wanted to leave bread on porches. Jonah watched the town respond with an almost embarrassed humility. People told stories to one another about how every small kindness saved them once, and somewhere in those exchanges, grief knitted itself into gratitude. Months later, a developer came through with a plan to buy and bulldoze the row of century homes by the mill, homes where many of the benefactor's recipients lived. He promised profit and new storefronts. The town council split. Jonah knew what his father would do. The ledger felt heavier than ever. He started to make calls, small ones that arranged for tenants to meet lawyers and for funds to cover moving costs and for a grassroots campaign to buy the homes. It was messy and political and likely to founder on numbers and ego. Jonah kept working in the quiet. The night before the council vote, someone left a note on Jonah's porch. Promise kept. No signature. He read it, felt the presence of his father like a hand on his shoulder. He slept light and woke to the sound of people gathering. Maya was there, too, notebook open but with little to write. She had become less the hunter and more a witness to what a promise does when fulfilled by many hands. When the vote came, the council surprised nobody and the developer lost his margin. The community had raised the money. The houses would stay. People wept openly. Jonah thought then how small acts accumulate into a life that looks enviable and impossible at once. A life built not on grand gestures meant to be broadcast, but on 1,000 private mercies that demanded nothing in return. Years later, when Jonah was old and his shoulders thick with the ledger's heft, he walked out to the edge of town where the highway light bled into prairie and the horizon was that same promise his father had pointed at. He reached into his pocket and found the coin his father had hidden there decades ago. He set it on the dashboard, tapped it with a thumb, and let it clink against the wheel. A car passed, lights fleeting. Jonah smiled. Around him, the town hummed with a peace that took work and stubbornness to protect. The winter man had been more than one person. He had been a way of living. At the end, Maya wrote again, this time a feature about what happened when a community learns to keep its own promises. People read it and thought about the small ways they could be heavy with someone else's care. Jonah kept the ledger until his hands couldn't hold a pen, and then he left it in a shoebox on his own porch, with a note taped to the lid. Take up what you can. Carry it quietly. It gets heavy because it matters. When the next child woke before sunrise and stood at the edge of town with a father tapping the dashboard and pointing at the horizon, the promise passed on like light. Someone had kept weight so others could learn to carry it. That is the thing that feels enviable, Jonah thought at the end. Not wealth, not fame, but the ability to be the person others can rely on without question. It was an ordinary kind of heroism, a life stitched together by small mercies, and it made people want to be better. In Hollowell, promises were heavy, yes, but they were also lifelines. And when the weight is shared, it becomes not burdensome but blessed.